All right, it's Iron Bowl week, so there's literally no one better to have on the show than Pat Smith. You know him from WJOX Radio, co-creator of the Paul Finebaum Show, and a host of one of the best shows out there, Three Man Front. Pat, thanks for taking the time.
Oh, absolutely. Anytime, Mike.
So, like I said, it's Iron Bowl week, and we were joking off air. I mean, things change in a hurry, don't they, Pat? I mean, Alabama was marching to the SEC championship, looked like a lock for the playoff. Still got those hopes, but they're slim. Meanwhile, Auburn got the biggest win. I don't think it's debatable of the Hugh Freeze era. So, man, things change in a hurry, don't they?
Yeah, they really do, because just about 3 weeks ago, you had Hugh Freeze on every hot seat list that you could come up with for 2025. You had Auburn looking like there was no way that they could get to a bowl game. And Alabama, as you mentioned, after that LSU win, it was like full steam ahead. Alabama's booking hotel rooms, not literally, but the fans are in Atlanta. CFP on deck after that. And then all of a sudden, a funny thing happened on the way to Norman. The offense didn't show up. The defense didn't show up. And then all of a sudden, the Alabama Crimson Tide are on the outside looking in. So you could see these two ships passing in the night from a program standpoint, because Auburn's got the momentum. Meanwhile, where's the psychological makeup of this Alabama team right now? That's the biggest question that we've been fielding all week long on WJOX, is what is that makeup of Jalen Milroe and this Alabama football team going in the biggest rivalry game of their career?
And just how bad does Kalen Deboer need this one? Because, again, he's not going to get fired or anything. Maybe he should. But if he loses this game, I mean, losing 4 games with, I get it, there was defections and all that, but still, top 5-ish roster in all of college football. I mean, I heard there was talk of that in the offseason, losing several games, but I never in my wildest dreams, Pat, did I imagine Alabama could go 8-4.
We talked about it about the midway point right before the Georgia game. We said, okay, the 3 big games on Alabama's schedule remaining, which was at that particular time, it was Georgia, then it was Tennessee, and then it was LSU. We said on the program, Alabama needed to win 2 out of those 3. If they win 2 out of those 3, they're going to be in good shape. Okay, well, you get the Georgia win, you're going, okay, well, they got that big one. Now it's just kind of icing on top of the cake. And then Vandy happened. And then all of a sudden you're like, oh, my goodness, what is going on here? And then you go to Tennessee and you're going, okay. Then all of a sudden you're thinking, now this LSU game is going to be a mess because they haven't played well on the road. And then what happens? They go and it looks like they righted the ship. So a lot of confusion amongst those in the media that cover the team and those Alabama fans thinking, you beat the best team in the country in Georgia. You ought to have a little bit of stock there to move forward. And then all of a sudden you take about 3 steps back and then you come back and do LSU. And it's just very perplexing, Mike. But to answer your question with a very long answer, Kalen Deboer needs this, because I go back to what Gene Stallings said many, many years ago at Alabama. If you don't think it's an important game, just try losing it. And then when you lose it, you're going to find out real quick how important it is. And he needs this one. He really does, to think that this team with that much talent, think about what he did in Seattle with less talent. Then you come to Tuscaloosa, you have a Heisman Trophy finalistic quarterback. You've got 5-star talent all over that roster, and you end up losing 4 games. No, that is something that people in Tuscaloosa could never fathom, at least the juncture in which they've got to the 4 losses, especially with Vanderbilt and Oklahoma.
Right, and is it safe to say Auburn's playing with house money? I realize they still need a win to get to the postseason, but if they don't get it, Hugh will say, we got a top 5 class. I was focused on it. But again, I have never seen an underdog to this level be this confident going into a big rivalry game like this. Is Auburn playing with house money? And can you recall in the Iron Bowl history, a double-digit underdog seemingly having all the confidence in the world that they're going to win on the road?
Off the top of my head, no, Michael. And you think about this Auburn team, they do have a lot of momentum. And the main reason why is they stopped turning the football over. Peyton Thorne started playing like the quarterback that they thought that he was going to be. You've got obviously one of the best running backs in the SEC. And all of a sudden, Jarquez Hunter, when he gets 100 yards rushing, they're 4-0 on this season. So all of a sudden, that alarm went off in Hugh Freeze's mind. Let me hand the ball off. And that has been the key to their success. So they're going up against an Alabama team that's 12th in the SEC against the run. So that's going to bode well, because you're going to get a heavy dose of that. Jalen Milroe in the 3 Alabama losses, he's gotten 28 total yards rushing, 28 total. in 3 losses for Alabama. So DJ Durkin, you know what kind of plan he's going to have. Not saying that they can execute it like Brent Venables did in Norman on Saturday, but they're going to load that box. They're going to make Jalen Milroe try to beat you throwing the football. And if he has the bad kind of night like he had in Norman, then all of a sudden that 11.5, 12-point spread that Vegas has right now, that does not look very competent if you're an Alabama fan.
Right. And I know you got so many hours to fill over there, 3-man front, JOX Radio, but has this ever been broached? I'm curious. I'm sure it has because there's just so many wild callers you guys get, but I don't know what Jalen Milroe's future is. I think he's got massive potential and at times looks like the best player in college football. Other times he looks completely lost in this offense. What's his future? Is he going to the NFL? I can't imagine he's NFL ready. I can't imagine he really wants to keep playing for this coach and this offense. Maybe I'm wrong. And here's where I'm really getting, Pat. I hope you've been asked this before because I don't want you to fall out of your chair or anything. But clearly, you got to assume after Hugh Freeze and his comments, they're going to go heavy in the portal. Could you imagine a world where Jalen Milroe enters the portal and ends up at Auburn?
No. I think this is it for him for his college career. I have not been asked that question, by the way. Auburn does need a quarterback after this year, but they've got plenty in their stable down on the plains. But back to Jalen Milroe, it seems at time, Mike, that he has pressed. When you try to get these small successes at the beginning of a game, whether it's him running the football or, maybe hits 4 out of his first 5 passes, something like that, you could tell that the confidence level, he's to the point to where he's that type of Heisman Trophy finalist. But then when you get into the frustrations like he did in Norman and what he did at Tennessee, when he started missing wide open wide receivers, then when you got to Vanderbilt, what happened? He threw a quick pick 6. Then all of a sudden Alabama's playing from behind as opposed to being in front. Didn't happen in Baton Rouge. That psychological thing that has got him trying to do too much at the beginning of a game when things aren't going his way. That's the thing that concerns a lot of people. But in regards to his future, I think he's full steam ahead as a professional athlete. I think that his time at the University of Alabama will conclude at the end of this football season.
Oh, interesting. Okay. What do you think the keys for each side to get a victory on Saturday in the Iron Bowl would be?
Well, I think it's pretty simple from an Auburn perspective. You run the ball, you stop the run. If you can do those 2 things, it's going to be a good afternoon. For Alabama, they got to get success early in the game. That confidence level that I was just talking about. They got to hit Ryan Williams on some deep balls. You got to have Jeremy Bernard be able to catch the ball, unlike he did in Norman, Oklahoma. The offensive line played its worst game of the year against Oklahoma. And DJ Durkin, he's a really good defensive coordinator. He's up for the Broyles Award. He is someone, as irony would have it, Mike, he was going to be offered the DC job if Nick Saban would have stayed at Tuscaloosa. He interviewed with Nick Saban the day before he announced his retirement. He was going to be the guy. And then all of a sudden, Saban leaves, new staff comes in, and then he gets the job down the plains at Auburn. So the irony of him going to be the key, in my opinion, to this ball game to be able to stop Jalen Milroe in this Alabama offense.
I don't know if you've seen or paid much attention to bowl projections, but let's just assume Alabama wins this game but still does not make the playoff. It seems like most people have Alabama pegged to the best non-playoff bowl. I think it's the Cheez-It, whatever it's called, bowl.
Or against Iowa or Illinois, somebody like that. Yeah.
Let's say that happens. Over, under 8.5, 9 opt-outs. Because again, I don't know what the culture is there, but it at times seems questionable, is putting it kindly.
I would say I would take the over in that regard to opt-outs. And let me throw this caveat out there. I think that that's not an Alabama situation. I think that is an overall college football. I'm not in the college football playoff. I'm going to decide to opt out because I've got an uncle in my ear telling me how much money I can get by going ahead and getting ready for the NFL draft. I think that has nothing to do. Now, a couple years ago, you had Bryce Young, you had Najee Harris one year decide, that he was going to come back, and he played in a bowl game against Michigan. So, from a leadership standpoint, there's been no warning signs this season that there's been a problem in the locker room or there's a problem after a loss. They have done a really nice job at least saying the right things. There hasn't been the division in the locker room. But I just think it's an overall college football problem, Mike. I think at the end of the day, if you're not in the CFP, all college football teams are going to have a problem unless you've got an NIL deal that is signed, locked, sealed, and delivered that you're required to play in an extra game, in a bowl game. I think you're going to have mass defections across the board in college football.
Mm-hmm. And do you think it's probably way too early to, I'm not asking you to make a definitive statement here, but do you think Kalen Deboer is a good fit after, less than a year? But or will that kind of will the temperature be decided after this game? Because I've heard it from people that I trust that some of the power people there are kind of put off by him just because he's so different from Nick Saban.
Right. Well, here's the thing. So when Nick Saban got the job at Alabama, he pretty much told Mal Moore, "This is my job. You keep all the big boosters out of it. I will let you know when I need a booster to write a check to build a new weight room." And Mal Moore said, "You know what? Done. No questions asked." So all of a sudden that power vacuum disappeared. Well, guess what happened, Mike? The moment that Nick Saban decided he was going to retire on that afternoon, all of a sudden, all of the folks that was told to get out of the program and just write checks, now all of a sudden they're going to write checks, but now they wanted that input. And so all of a sudden, when you see Alabama not performing to the level that Nick Saban did, you've got a lot of people that are talking. You've got a lot of alumni, a lot of boosters saying, okay, now what are we going to do here? But I'm just going to give you a couple of hard facts. If they were to get rid of Kalen Deboer without cause, it's $69 million, okay? That ain't happening. He's going to be there for a while. Just like Brian Kelly at LSU, you'd owe him $60 million. He ain't going nowhere. Heck, Billy Napier's going to get another year. They owe him about $23 million. I mean, you see the theme developing here, okay? Do I think that he's going to make mass changes on his staff? Absolutely. Because they came in here, they were able to get a good recruiting class. They've got one of the top recruiting classes as of right now verbally committed. So they're going to see that through. But at the end of the day, it's ultimate. Same thing that happened to Nick Saban. The first offensive coordinator for Nick Saban at Alabama was Major Applewhite, okay? And then all of a sudden, he made that change and then made some defensive changes. So it's going to be a revolving door, but I think Kalen Deboer, if you look at the other alternatives that was out there, I think Kalen Deboer is a good football coach. I think he's going to do fine here. But it's the fact that you're following the legend, the GOAT, and Nick Saban, the perception and the level that is expected from the fans it's just through the roof, and it's something that it's never going to be repeated again. And, trying to find that lightning in a bottle again. Kalen Deboer is a really good football coach. Obviously, this is not the roster that he constructed. There's a lot of leftover Nick Saban pieces, very talented on paper. But let's just say, and I'm just speculating, this is not something that somebody told me, but if these are the guys that he didn't bring in, is this really the offense that Kalen Deboer wants to run? He brought a quarterback in from Washington that they're going to develop, okay? So I think you're going to be able to see more of a Kalen Deboer offense in year 2 and year 3 as opposed to year 1 because you have a lot of leftover pieces that Nick Saban had put in place.
Mm-hmm. And I know it's too early to get a real answer on a question like this, and these programs would never tamper with anybody, so I'm not suggesting that. But any indication on Auburn, what they're willing to do in terms of attracting a portal quarterback? Are they going to go all in, or are they, like I've once said on your program, shop at the dollar store?
Well, one thing is for sure. I think the first and foremost, they're going to have a top 5 recruiting class. So they're going to have to make sure that those guys are buttoned up from an NIL perspective. You've got Cam Coleman, one of the best wide receivers in America, who's a freshman, who is obviously going to get a lot of targets in the Iron Bowl. That is someone that you got to make sure you're going to keep happy. Well, to keep him happy, you're going to probably have to go out and you're going to probably have to spend some money to get an experienced quarterback to come in. Everything that I've been reading is that this quarterback class and the transfer portal, unless something crazy happens, is not going to be the level that it was the last year or two. And the reason why is because you've got those 6-year COVID guys are now graduating. They're not these veteran quarterbacks that you can go and get. There's not a Cam Ward that's available immediately. Now, there could be some guys that get ticked off and they end up in the transfer portal. Then all of a sudden it's a whole different story. But as of right now, I think Auburn will absolutely be looking hard and heavy for an established quarterback that they can run what they want to run, and also at the same time keep those young wide receivers engaged.
Mm-hmm. Hey, and which fan base do you think will be happiest with a win on Saturday? Because I don't think there's a wrong answer. I think they'll be equally as mad. But I'm just kind of curious which one would be the happiest with a win on Saturday.
Oh, there's no question it's Auburn. And the reason why is because they could feel the momentum. The recruiting has not let off. You haven't had guys, even when they were leading the nation in turnovers and things weren't looking very good, they're holding on to guys. Matter of fact, they're starting to flip some guys. So that has not refrained at all. And so you get a win against your biggest rival. That momentum continues into recruiting and signing day. And on top of that, you really make a statement against the new regime in Tuscaloosa. So, yeah, you're going up against them in recruiting, but now on the field, they're going to do something in Tuscaloosa if they win that hasn't been done since 2010, and that's when Cam Newton was the quarterback. So think about that for a second. You got Peyton Thorne that could possibly go in there and be in the same conversation as a Cam Newton to beat an Alabama football team. So it's going to be a great game. I think it's going to be a really close one. I'm scratching my head. Vegas saying that's an 11.5, 12-point spread for Alabama. But Alabama plays a different style of ball when they're at Bryant-Denny. They're averaging 43 points a game at Bryant-Denny. You've seen the turnover problems that Auburn has had, especially on the road. So I think it's going to be a big give and take game for both sides. But no question, in my opinion, if Auburn wins this game, that fan base is going to be so over the moon. They're not going to be like Texas and say we're back, but they're definitely going to say, you know what? We have absolutely, put our flag down in the state of Alabama and the SEC that this thing's going in the right direction. Now, if they lose, then all those questions about a month ago we had about Hugh Freeze and about the future of this program, those same questions are going to be there in the offseason.
Mm-hmm. What's your level of surprise that we've not had a SEC coach fired? And I know there's, a long list of things with the House settlement and paying the players, this, that, and the other that remains unresolved, which is helping someone like Billy Napier. But heck, Pat, I remember COVID. I mean, we may have to eliminate sports, and then they turn around and fired Will Muschamp and this guy and that. I mean, it never mattered. They'll just fire anybody. How surprised are you that it looks like we're not going to get any firings?
Yeah, based on what you said about the House settlement, I think that's the biggest concern of these athletic departments. They just don't know how much money they have. And not to mention the fact that if you're talking about a price tag of NIL of 21 to 23 million every single year that you've got to pay student athletes, and then you're sitting there going, am I really going to pay, a Sam Pittman or a Billy Napier to go home and sit at their lake house and us pay them millions and millions of dollars? Now, I do think that you're starting to see the theme, unless you're an American Conference coach, because it seems like they fired half the league. But if you're a Power Four, I think what they're doing is they're calling the coach in and go, okay, well, we're going to give you another year or two, but you're going to have to get rid of your offensive coordinator. That's a cheaper route for them to be able to make the changes as opposed to paying these large, ridiculous buyouts that Jimmy Sexton has negotiated for these coaches. So I see more of the assistant coaches getting the axe, but the head coaches, they're going to give them a little bit more leeway because they just don't know from a budgetary standpoint if they're going to be able to afford to get rid of a guy.
Yeah. Do you think that could, in the future, aid college football? Because again, I mean, you don't have to tell me about it. I'm a Tennessee grad. I mean, they've recycled guys every 3 or 4 years for 20 years. And it's just, again, none of those guys were really that great of coach, but Florida the same. I mean, there's many schools in this conference. They just churn out these coaches, and it seems like they're spinning the wheels. Maybe some stability would be good for a lot of these programs.
I think it would be. The other issue with that, though, Mike, is the problem with the transfer portal, because back in the old days, you would go recruiting. I'll never forget a few years ago, Kirby Smart on the recruiting trail, he was telling every recruit in America that Nick Saban is old. Nick Saban is going to retire. Why would you sign a deal to go to Alabama? Because by the time you become a junior or a senior, Nick Saban's not going to be your head coach. So why are you going to commit to him? Because he's not going to commit to be there long term. That was the recruiting spin that Georgia had against Alabama. Well, now all these coaches, because of the transfer portal, these kids are wanting to come in and play immediately. These 18-year-olds want to be Cam Coleman. They want to be Ryan Williams at 17. They want to get the big money. They want to drive a fancy car, and they want to be playing on national television in prime time. And they're not going to wait around in year 2 or year 3 to be developed. If not, they're going to immediately go to another program. So the coaching aspect of it yeah, it's great to have someone there for the longevity, but with that roster churn day in and day out, I just don't think that matters as much. It's more of a budget situation from these universities, not from a consistency standpoint, but it's all about the money and can they afford to get rid of those guys when they feel like they've made a mistake.
Mm-hmm. All right. Last thing for you, Pat. Really appreciate your time. But yeah, you got me thinking because again, obviously you've seen it. We've all seen it. The trash talk, the Iron Bowl trash talk this week. Where would you rate this thing in terms of all time hatred? On a scale of let's say 1 to 10, 10 being all time. Is it still relatively low because we got a first year Alabama coach and a second year Auburn coach? Where's that scale? Whether it be the players, the teams, or even the fans.
Believe it or not, I think it's just the society we live in now. We're just so used to it. Back when Auburn had won six in a row, and you had Tommy Tuberville saying "fear the thumb" and all that kind of stuff. That kind of irritated the fan bases more. But honestly, those comments really shocked everybody. On our radio show, we don't have a lot of Alabama fans calling up, going crazy. I thought Jalen Milroe's comment yesterday was funny. Where he didn't even know who this guy was from Auburn. That made the comment. And, talking to former players from Alabama and Auburn, they come up in a different age and they said our coaches would kill us. There's no way that our coaches would even put a microphone in front of us and allow us to pontificate about something like that because you don't want to give somebody, that billboard or locker room material. So for the most part, it was funny. It was great radio for us, but at the end of the day, I really don't think it registered as much as you would like it to. Listen, I love a good hatred. I love the good back and forth. I mean, my goodness, it made me and Paul famous because a guy got pissed off and poisoned a tree. So, I'm all for, obviously legally, I'm all for people to be fired up and pissed off at each other's rival. But for the most part this week, it's been pretty tame. I think Alabama fans are still shocked about what happened in Norman, and Auburn people are feeling pretty good right now.
Yeah, I can't believe, at the end of all your shows this week, you didn't have to say, regardless of what happens, don't mess with the trees. Legally we're obligated to say that. But I appreciate you, Pat. Before you go, can you tell my audience how can they follow you? How can they find your work?
Absolutely. Thanks, Mike. It's always fun to be on with you. And please give my best to cousin Shane for the holidays. You can listen to us weekdays from 10 to 2 on WJOX in Birmingham and across the state of Alabama. You go to joxfm.com. We're on YouTube every day. You can watch us if you would like, Jox945 TV. Also, you can follow me on Twitter at Pat Smith Radio.
All right. Happy Thanksgiving, Pat. Thank you so much.